Good evening, Malden. Welcome to the Malden Zone, TMZ. I'm your host this evening, Joe Piantedosi. Nice to be here. It is Wednesday, November 14th, 2012. I have a very special guest that I'm going to bring on in a minute, but first I have a public announcement that I'd like to read to you and announce. The Outreach Community and Reform Center presents Mayor Christensen's Public Safety Awareness Meeting. And this monthly event is to keep Malden aware of trends in crime, ways to stay safe, and new initiatives the city is working on to make our neighborhoods a safer place to live and work. And this coming week, which will be Saturday, this coming weekend, Saturday, November 17th, from 6 to 8 p.m., is going to feature a few people we all know. There's first Lieutenant Kevin Molis, great guy, from the Malden Police Department. There's Deputy Chef Jack Colangeli from the Malden Fire Department. And there's the Director, Bob Knox, who's the Director of the DPW. And other speakers will include Mike Crotty, the Wiring Inspector, and Attorney Maria Luis for the Mayor's Property Unity. And public questions and answers, it's Saturday, November 17th, 2012, 6 to 8 p.m. And it's going to be at 22 Pleasant Street on the 3rd floor in Malden, the Outreach Community and Reform Center. And any questions, you can reach them at, DAWA mass.org, 781-322. I am so blind, I can't see anymore. Anyway, call MATV.
You want some help?
I need help. I can't see, my glasses don't work anymore. It's pretty funny. I want to tell you something about Kevin Molis, who's a great guy. And Kevin Molis,
it's Saturday the 17th.
Saturday the 17th, 6 to 8, and it's going to feature the deputy chief, who rumors, by the way, is he may become the chief. I don't know if that's true or not. Maybe my guest will know more about that. And then Kevin Molis, who is a great guy. He's a lieutenant here in the Malden Police Department, and many people don't know this, but Kevin put himself through college working at our bakery. And so I had the good pleasure of knowing Kevin probably about 30 years ago when he was a young college student. And he was probably one of the best workers. We had a great guy and a great worker. And it was before he was on the force. Everyone loved him. And, you know, it was so fitting for him to be on the police force and be such a strong, powerful person here in the city. But he's a great guy. But anyway, this public safety awareness meeting Mayor Christensen is holding Saturday, November 17th. At the Outreach Community and Reform Center, 22 Pleasant Street here in Malden, on the 3rd floor on this Saturday from 6 to 8. So please,
6 to 8 at night?
6 to 8 at night. I'm going to bring my guest. I'm going to talk about the weather and all this, but I can't wait to bring my guest on, who's a very special guest, to a wide shot here, Frank. Mayor Ed Lucey. I don't like to call you mayor because you're still the mayor to me. Even
like
though
being a judge?
It's like being a judge or a senator or a president, right?
Yeah,
You still have that title.
Yeah.
But, of course, Ed was the mayor for how many years here?
2 terms.
2 terms here in Malden. And now he hosts with the off week, the first week of the month, basically.
First Wednesday of the month.
TMZ. I might get him to try to switch with me next month because I can't do the second, unfortunately. But anyway, Ed does a great job. And you're a fixture here in the city. I mean, you
like the furniture?
Yeah, like the furniture. Of course, you have your insurance company, which keeps you busy.
Well, that's Greg and Scott, my sons, have taken that over, so I'm kind of on the sidelines there. I still stay active. I don't play golf, so I really do insurance, but I do it out of my home.
So you're not in the office anymore?
Well, just if I have appointments, I use the conference room. I'll go down there. I have mail that comes in, and sometimes someone's looking for me. I'll be down there, but I'm not there on a regular basis. But I came in. I'll give myself a plug. I came into business many years ago in the life end of it, so I still do some of that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So if someone wants to call you to get insurance, they can still reach out to you with?
Yeah, if it's convenient for me. Yeah.
Okay, good to hear. Now let me, I want to ask you a question before. We're going to talk about this past election, and Ed's got one view and I've got another view, and we were going to be on last week together, but I couldn't be in town. So Ed was gracious enough to be on tonight, so we're going to talk about some stuff. But now the mayor's, correct me if I'm wrong, that was the first time you ran for any public office?
Oh, no. I was a state representative
I didn't know that.
Yeah, in 5 terms in the city council.
How long were you state rep? So you were state rep representing Malden?
Well, I was in 1977, and that was the next election at that time was going to reduce the size of the House of Representatives from 240 to 160 members. So that was a very contentious 2-year term because everybody was looking over each other's shoulder because about 80 of the people would eventually have to run against each other in order to reduce the numbers of members from the 240 to 160. And so that was an interesting election. Again, I did not win that one, but there was a huge number of absentee votes, and I didn't get a lot of those, and that was the difference in the election. And as I sometimes remind people, I'm still here. My opponent went to jail. So
who was your opponent? Was
John McNeil.
McNeil? Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, an interesting person.
Yeah, I remember.
Person of what do they call that? The person
of interest.
Yeah.
Now is he still here in Malden? He's out of jail. I do know, right?
Yeah, he didn't do long enough. But
is
anyway,
he still in Malden?
Oh yes. Yeah,
Okay.
I don't run into him hardly at all anymore. But he's still here.
Now, let me ask you, you're still a young guy, and you know, former no more political desire to seek
Well,
office?
you know, I'm not that young, number one, but my son is on the city council, and
Great,
so
sure,
obviously
that's a
that
great
kind of gets the next generation comes along, and obviously at some point you have to kind of look back and say, you know, let someone else go forward, and really in the dynamics of government. Sometimes timing means a lot in politics, as we witnessed in the past election at the state level. And sometimes people who are very viable candidates pick the wrong opponent or pick the wrong election, and they don't win. And
I'm going to tell you something pretty funny. You know, I love politics, and I at one point maybe even thought about doing something.
You should have.
But I'll tell you what deterred me. You know, I was the president of the Malden Chamber for too many years.
Right.
5 years, longer than anybody in the history.
Right.
They kept on. I couldn't leave. And that was not really political, but it's somewhat political. And what I learned was no matter what I did, I would upset people. And it dawned on me one day. It's kind of funny because I would do something and I did it because I thought it was the right thing to do. And I didn't do it with any malicious intent or any. Some people thought I was doing things to better myself.
You sound like Ed Lucey.
But were you the same? No, and I did. But what it dawned on me was, if you were doing great, if you have a 50% approval rating, right? You're doing pretty good, right?
Yeah, get much better than that. You're in great shape.
I looked at that as a negative, thinking that means half the people don't like you.
Yeah.
And I don't think I could live with that. And I remember like making decisions when I was the chamber president, because it got a little political at times.
Of course it would.
And people would accuse me, I'd hear buzzwords around, that I was doing something to benefit my company or me personally, or I was in cahoots with somebody. I hear these things, and are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And here I am doing, I did minor things. It was kind of funny. Much like we had a breakfast on Ash Wednesday. And I was noticing the attendance was down. I forget who the speaker was that day. We would have, if you remember the breakfast, I used to have this priest that came on, great guy, Father Walsh. Great guy. He was from Regis College. Everyone loved him because he was funny. And I had him on Ash Wednesday. So when I realized people weren't coming because they said, geez, I go to Mass, you know, a lot of the Catholics weren't going to come.
Yeah.
So I said, you know what? And I called him up and I said, Father, I said, you come in Ash Wednesday morning. I said, I didn't even realize when we booked it, any chance you could distribute ashes? He said, sure, I don't see why not. I'll bring some. So it was at Anthony's, and we announced we were going to give ashes. And all of a sudden, we sold more tables, a few more, not a lot.
Interesting.
And so here it was. So at the end of, I announced, I said, for those of you that are here that didn't go to Mass, Father Walsh at the end of the breakfast was going to stand in the back of the room and distribute ashes. And I thought it was a great thing. And so many people were so excited. And I had more people condemning me, saying I was, mixing church and state, and how could I do that? And it was pretty funny. And here I am thinking I'm doing a good thing, good service, you know. And I would make these, then I would have events outside the city. And here I am, not to benefit me. Matter of fact, it was funny. I'll talk about it now. Albert Spatafor, who I'm very close to now, was before, was mad at me thinking I was taking events away from him. Wasn't actually, because I added so many events. He got more than he ever did, but we started having events at the Hilltop, at Kowloon, at the Davenport Yacht Club. These were friends of mine. They're customers. They were doing us a favor because they weren't making a lot of money. They were giving us reduced rates. Yeah. So it wasn't like I was giving them business. Yeah. And the chamber at that point was very slow in paying anyway. So I was a little embarrassed because we'd sign up, and now we're paying them in piecemeal. And I just thought it would be exciting to move things around, you know. Plus, I got them to join. And these establishments paid more money because they had more employees. So it was I'm looking at it that it's helping the community, letting people move around, and then I'm hearing people, you're taking events outside the city, that's not promoting business in the city. And so anyway, long story short, then it was kind of funny because I was thinking of this during Election Day. And the last time I was even thinking of possibly running was when John Kerry was running against Bush for president.
Oh, okay.
And what year was that? That was, was that 2000? No, 2004?
98, I think.
Was that 98? I'm losing my, was it 98?
Well, you have to count back. You can figure this 12,
Well, Bush
12,
was in from
04, in 8 years, would be 92, I think. No, 94. Well, I don't know.
Well, anyway, what it was, the first time they ran against each other, okay? I mean, the only time they ran.
96.
When did?
It was the day that it rained so hard, even the roof leaked in Anthony's.
But when was that?
I still have the tape.
What, the Ash Wednesday?
I have Ash Wednesday and I have John Kerry.
Okay. Well, this was when John Kerry was running for office.
12 years ago.
It was, wow.
Yeah,
12
it
years
was a long time ago.
It was 12 years ago. So the funny thing is, I had people speculating. I didn't even live in this district, but matter of fact, Ed Markey had called me personally, and he said to me, Ed Markey, that he was going to, that Kerry was going to, it was in the bag. I mean, he didn't say it was in the bag, but he said, Kerry's going to win. He said, and I'm not going to throw my hat in the ring yet, but I'm going to run for his Senate seat, said Markey. I don't think I'm talking out of school. I mean, there was buzz, but he told me that. And everybody thought, okay, so it was going to be a shift. Ed Markey was going to run for Kerry. Kerry's going to become president. Ed was going to run for his seat, probably win. Richard Tassay, who was our state senator at the time, was going to run for Markey's seat. And there was this speculation that I was going to run for Tassay's seat. And I had never, and it was kind of funny. This rumor was going around. And more people were saying that's, and I mean, I thought about it for 5 minutes and said I wouldn't run. But plus I didn't even live here. So it's kind of funny. But anyway, long story short, I never ran, and I think it would have been nice, but also what I don't like is the approval rating, and I hate asking people for money. And I know it's tough, and you have to be a good candidate and a good politician. Did you mind knocking on doors and?
No, the doors didn't bother. No, I didn't mind that at all. As a matter of fact, that was part of a way of campaigning that I found easy to do. Obviously, what happens is sometimes you go to a door and someone has a particular issue that's of great concern to them, and you may not agree with them on it. And if that's their one issue, then you're not going to get their vote. But on the other hand, it was also a way of interacting with people that you don't always get. But obviously, the other thing that happens is the higher up you go into the pecking system in terms of politics, the more remote you are from that kind of ground roots campaign, because now, as you witnessed in this last election, the obscene amount of money that was spent, and the way that they campaign now, it's not only polling of people, and it's a constant polling, tracking and that sort of thing, but also it's the internal polls that they do, which go beyond just to get the preference of a person. And so it seems a lot of campaigns are run that way, and the national campaigns particularly are focused on less on maybe sometimes on reaching out to people, but it's to measure what's going to satisfy the voters in order for you to win.
Right.
And the interesting thing, I think, in this last election, I thought that more recently that I mean, how do you actually reach out to people with so many people don't have landlines any longer?
Exactly.
But they do the robocalls, and in some fashion they've now been able to figure out a way to do it. And for the most part, the polls were pretty accurate, or going along. If you look at the numbers and the way that they pegged the trends, what was wrong was some of these so-called insiders, like Dick Morris among others, and even Newt Gingrich. He had an email he had sent out to his inner people close to him, who were part of the nucleus of his group, and somehow or other went to the wrong party, and it indicated that he was already conceding, this is before the election day, that Obama was going to win. And he was talking about 2016. And you say, gee whiz, that's certainly not what's being projected by a lot of the higher level political people connected to the Republican Party. And then I think it was the night before, I don't recall, it was the night before election, on the election night, he and Dick Morris are on Fox News, I think it was, and he's saying that the president's going to lose by 3 to 5%, Dick Morris, who's been pretty much involved with the campaign since Clinton, said that he's going to win by more than 5, and Romney's going to get 300 electoral votes. So Morris might have believed that.
That was speculation, because I did hear Morris say that, and I think it was. I almost think it was wishful thinking and speculation. But to talk about the polling and to talk about the accuracy, Romney was up in the polls as we were getting nearer to the election day, and surprisingly, if you look at the numbers after the election, Obama won by a pretty substantial amount. It wasn't as close as the polls had predicted, and it wasn't as close. I mean, Romney didn't win. A lot of the polls I saw had Romney winning, by a hair, and it wasn't the case at all. And then there was even talk, one might win the popular, the other might win the electoral vote, but it was a clear win for Obama, and it wasn't too close.
No, but it was when Romney did, and I think he was meaning it when he said that he didn't even have a concession speech, because his concession speech was half as long as his acceptance speech.
Right.
But the workings of the voters is sometimes, give you my own overview. I thought Romney as the election was progressing, that he had a reasonably good chance of winning. And to paraphrase maybe some of the times which he did do was the question that Ronald Reagan posed when he ran against Jimmy Carter: "Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago?" He did use that a little bit, and I thought at the last minute, because it seemed that there were a lot of fluency to the people's attitudes towards who they were going to vote for, that a lot of people, they used up their unemployment, they may be exhausted, their 401ks, their houses were underwater. And this is, across the country, and the unemployment figures were really not accurate. They were a lot higher than some people stopped looking for work, and some people have taken early Social Security. So I thought that maybe a lot of people at the last minute might go to the polls and say, how much worse off can we be with the new guy versus the current president, because I'm not doing that well now. And yet it didn't work out that way.
Right.
That people, in fact, the people that voted Democratic, if you think about it, they're not the people, Hispanics, of course, the people of color would understandably have a strong support for Obama.
Correct. And that's not a prejudice. That kind of bothered me, to be honest with you. Let's talk about that. I'm not a racist. I know you're not a racist, and I don't know many people that are racist. You can joke about it.
Well, there's a subtlety to it sometimes.
Well, but it's amazing that I know Governor Sununu made a couple of comments, but oftentimes what I didn't like was anytime someone made a negative comment about the president in any way during the campaign. Oh, he's a racist. Yeah. Had nothing to do with his race or origin. Yeah. And I think a lot of campaign spin was, if you're anti-Obama, you're a racist.
No, I didn't think that. I never
felt
saw
that way. I saw. Well, I know that John Sununu made two comments, and John Sununu is an extreme Republican, no question. Big Fox News contributor, right? Yeah, you're probably not a fan, but John.
I really don't see him much at all, even on Fox News. Maybe I missed those programs.
John Sununu made two comments, and he was really lambasted for doing them. One of which he said. He mentioned Obama was late. Talked about the first debate, and when Obama didn't show up for the debate, even admitted he wasn't on his game. And Sununu said no. He said that was his game. He's lazy. He's a lazy president. I know for a fact he goes to meetings unprepared. He doesn't read his briefings. This was Sununu's take on Obama.
Well, I don't see that's prejudice.
But there was a huge spin that the word lazy was a negative racist remark, and Sununu intended that to happen. Then I saw Sununu a few days later come on and say there was no racial spin to that at all. I just know from what I hear that he's not prepared at meetings.
Well, they said the same about Bill Weld.
They did, exactly. Then fast forward,
Colin Powell had bourbon in the morning.
Exactly. Colin Powell came out in support of Obama. Now, Republican, was a Republican under Bush. He was the Secretary of State. Republican when he was general.
Potential candidate for president.
Exactly. He supported a Republican candidate too at that time, and he actually supported Obama for the first election.
He did.
And he came out and he said, just a few days before the election.
He did.
And Sununu again made a comment and was labeled a real racist because he said it's because of they're the same race.
Well, I don't know. See, there's a connection here, obviously, because there's a sense of pride, obviously, because of the he won that first effort. But if you go back in history, like with the Irish, for the most part, they're working group. They were working class people when they first came to America, and to a great extent, the first thing they did was register to vote, and the second thing they did is get a civil service job. But they were primarily democratic in there, because if you go through the history of the large city machines, and the Irish to a great extent settled in the cities, Chicago, Boston, New York, New Jersey, the communities in New Jersey of some sort, and they became beneficiaries really of the bosses who control the voting and the machine, and therefore, to a great extent, many of the successful politicians in the big cities in the last 50 to 75 years have been of Irish extraction. Maybe they're second or third generation.
Correct.
But in more recent times, as the Irish have grown in affluency and sometimes education, and sometimes become suburbanites, that you talk to people, they said, well, my father was never vote for Republican, but he says, I'm unenrolled, or I vote for Republicans. And so dynamics of where people look at and view elections has changed too, and that's just one minor.
You know what, we could go on for, and I want to go over a lot of stuff here. You know, one thing that bothers me is you got your diehard, either Republicans or Democrats, and I really take offense to people that say, I'm a Democrat. Why are you a Democrat? Because I'm a Democrat. And Democrats, people will say this, because my father was one and my grandfather was one, and Democrats are for the common man. You hear all these comments and everything, and in my lifetime, I've seen especially the Democratic Party change. Both parties have changed, and you've got your extremes on both sides. But you know, I think of JFK, and I wish that he lived. I would have loved to see what he could have done, and I think he was headed to do great things for this country. His famous speech of all was, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." That's not the Democratic mantra today. And that's what bothers me, because I was seeing people. I saw a woman I turned on Channel 7 one morning, shortly before the election, a day or two before, and there was a woman, and she was of color, was at a rally for Elizabeth Warren, and somebody just went up to her, I'm surprised Channel 7 aired this, and said, you know, you're here for Elizabeth Warren, and you know, why are you supporting Elizabeth Warren? And she said, I just think she's great. I'm paraphrasing. And she said, I just signed up for my third unemployment, third and final extension. That's the word. I'm sorry, third and final extension for unemployment. And I said to myself, first off, why would she even admit that on television, being interviewed, and say I like Elizabeth Warren because of that purpose? That's basically what she said. And you know, and I think back to what FDR started, and he was the one that correct me if I'm wrong, that started all these programs. Didn't he start welfare and
FDR?
FDR.
That's right.
That. But yet, again, these were programs, and I'm going to get lambasted for this, to help people that were truly in need, and basically to give them a lift, to get them through a rough period. But I think over the years, too many people have beat the system. And there are people out there that don't speak what Kennedy once spoke and said, what you can do for your country is gimme, 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 and let the country do for me. And I expect to collect, and I know more people that just have their hand out, and it's sad because it's not the way of the country, but there are so many people that aren't really pulling their weight, and they find ways. Talk about, and Elizabeth mentioned rigging the system. I think there are too many people out there that know how to rig the system, and they're out there, and they really shouldn't get that extension for unemployment, or they shouldn't be getting some type of compensation, because you know what, they can go out and get a job, and they're not. And their next door neighbor might be working their butt off, and their tax dollars are going to provide for these. And that's what bothers me, because I just think a lot of people out there, you know, and you know what? But you can't fault them in a way, because, you know, if you lose your job, and you can only you're quiet about this, you can only make a certain amount of money because you can't get the position you used to have. So if you sit back and you collect, gee, what is it, 60% of your salary?
Up to a cap. There's a cap.
Okay.
600 and...
But not taxable.
Mine's running out, you know.
Is it? No, but I'm just saying, so what's the sense? So why would you, I mean, years ago, but now when you grew up, if someone lost a job, if a contemporary of yours or someone's father that you grew up with, you know, they'd get a job bagging groceries. They'd pump gas. And, you know, they may have been a banker. I remember, I'm younger than you, but I remember someone's father would lose a job as a kid. You know, oh, my God. And he'd take a job doing anything.
Yeah, well, times are simpler then. I'm not defending, but the other hand, you know, you mentioned the speech of the President Kennedy, but during his term of office, there was a Tax Reform Act implemented at that time, and it expanded the tax code over 100 pages, which allowed exemptions for and incentives for businesses to supposedly improve on business. But so sometimes somebody else's charity is somebody else's tax benefit.
You're right.
But one of the things I'd like to maybe touch on before we get too deep in with the state, one of the most entertaining books of this campaign season comes to us from 2,000 years ago. And what it is talking about running a campaign to get elected to office. And one of the things it says, go negative early. One factor that can help you as an outsider is the poor quality of those people of the nobility who are competing against you. The second one is court the elite.
Okay.
We must diligently cultivate relationships with those men of privilege. Both you and your friends should work to convince them that you have always been a traditionalist. Never let them think you're a populist. Another one, develop a common touch. You must have excellent manners and are always courteous, but you will be rather stiff at times. Cultivate the youth vote. It would also help your campaign tremendously to have the enthusiasm and energy of young people on your side to canvass voters, gain supporters, spread news, and make you look good. And the final one, which is very common to political people, and best of all, make outrageous promises. It's better to have a few people in the forum disappointed when you let them down than have a mob outside your home when you refuse to promise them what they want. And so it goes along with that is that one of the central challenges for today's politicians is sucking up and spitting down. That is, paying far more attention to those with great power than to the great unwashed, while at the same time avoiding anything which might be perceived as class warfare. Now those comments I just made were written in 64 BC. Okay. That's 2,000 years ago. Yeah. And I don't think politicians have changed much.
No.
That was by Marcus Aurelius.
The only thing is money. And you talked about the expense of the campaign. And what's really troubling is both candidates, presidential candidates, close to $1 billion apiece, right? That was the number. Yeah. They both spent, so there's $2 billion there. And then the rest of the country, all the campaigns combined, was another $4 billion. So the last year alone, 2012, $6 billion was spent on campaigning and advertising and all that. And you know what? You look at that $6 billion, what could that have done to help this country? I mean, $6 billion is a lot of money. And you wake up a year later, and you know what? Nothing changed. I mean, the same man's...
Well, they're going to be changed. Something's going to change.
Yeah, but...
The cliff is coming.
Exactly. But I mean, no changes were made and $6 billion was spent. I mean, the Senate still is controlled by the Democrats. The House is controlled by the Republicans. The same president's in office. And there was very little shift in any balance, you know?
Well, if the strategy 4 years ago was to win and replace the incumbent president, then the focus for maybe the last 4 years has been on that road. And having now ended up with a loss of some Senate seats, which they shouldn't have lost because of poor candidates and poor campaigning, and they did lose some seats in the House. This is the Republicans now, and they obviously lost a presidential election. Then no longer can you kind of wait until we can do what we want to do when we get in, because they're not going to get in. And so what you're going to, and of course there's the dilemma that the Republicans have is that there's some touchstones that occur, which if you don't act on something, you automatically trigger cuts in defense spending and other kind of cuts at the federal level and on employment. So in some fashion, they're going to have to come together. But when you think about it, no matter who you are, there are unfair and inequitable kinds of things in the tax code. Yeah. And for the Republicans to take a no tax pledge made no sense at all if you thought about it. And what was even more surprising that you get all those congressmen who were Republicans. And it isn't a question of whether you're a D or an R. It's that all those people that were in the Congress took that pledge, and it was almost like the father Bush said, "No new taxes, read my lips," and he ended up losing the next election because what he did do, he realized when he got the job, he couldn't do that. He had to make some concessions in order to get something done, and by taking that kind of a pledge, you're boxing yourself in so that you're not even going to a negotiating a position that allows for flexibility. And I don't understand, especially when you know there are things that could be changed and should be changed because not everybody is treated equally. We make a lot of the people in the welfare system, and there is a lot of abuses, there's a lot of waste, there's a lot of ways that the system could be handled better. But if you took a segment of the population, self-employed people, people that work for cash, people that have sad jobs, they don't think anything of taking money and not declaring it on their income tax, and yet they might have some kind of criticism against people who are on food stamps or who get subsidized rents or who maybe even on unemployment. So sometimes a person's abusing the system, he himself or she herself might, if you look at, well, maybe I do a few things to cut corners on my own. So it isn't all just the welfare people.
No, I agree.
Yeah, and there's some of that. And I think...
You talk about taxes, and it's funny because a Democrat will say, what's interesting is, I don't mind, I've talked to people that are strong Democrats, and they'll say, I don't mind paying taxes. I don't mind. And I've had people say to me, this is what I've heard from several people, and intelligent people. These aren't just people on the streets or just, don't know anything about what's going on. I like safe streets. I like having a good fire department and police department and well-lit roads and passable roads. I'll pay my fair share of taxes. You have a business, too. You know accountability for money to come in. And what I don't like is when, okay, we have a deficit, let's just tax people. I mean, let's look at spending. I'll never forget the first time I went to D.C. I was a young kid. And when I drove down streets, and I forget who I was with, but said, that's the department of this, that's the huge, gigantic building that was filled with people. And you scratch your head and say, geez, all that, I mean, is that necessary? And then you hear and you read about positions in government that aren't necessary. People that get elected and they feel they owe somebody to help them get elected. So what do? They give them a role, a position. And I know people very close to me. I won't even mention one extremely close to me that worked for a politician who his claim to fame was how he cut his staff and cut office. Well, this person was hired, very little qualifications, that I know personally, because of a friendship type thing. And it bothered me. And this person really didn't deserve to have the job, was paid more than the person should have been paid for. And it's troubling to me that there's a lot of that going on. And you know what? I almost would like to see a tax bill, much like you run your household, you run your own business. Say, okay, you pay X amount of taxes. This is where your money's going. I mean, when you hear about, then all of a sudden you're watching the news and you hear about some agency or some cockamamie campaign that X amount that Congress approved, Republicans or Democrats. I mean, I just think there needs to be more accountability. And you don't just, you're in a whole, we run a business, the bakery. Okay, and all of a sudden, we're not making as much money as we should, or we're losing money. You don't just step back and increase your prices. You got to step back and say, wait a minute, let's cut our expenses. What are we doing here? If we're not making what we're supposed to be making, let's look at how we're operating. And before you, the last thing I feel is you raise your prices, because you don't want to put yourself at an unfair advantage in the marketplace, at least with us selling bread. Easy. All of a sudden, geez, let's raise our prices. We need more money. I just think there needs to, look at these stuff. There needs to be a lot more accountability, I think, with taxes. And you know what, pay it fair. And I believe in taxes. I believe in a standard across the board percentage. And you know what, pick a number. And if you make $200 a week, or you make $200,000 a week, if you pay a certain percentage, you all pay the same.
Can't pay. If you make $200, you can't. But listen,
well, I'm just saying.
That's good. We'll get back. Politicians in general say things. I just said here
exactly.
about they say things that please people so they'll get their vote.
Exactly.
The Republicans nominated a very capable guy in a lot of ways for vice president. And when they talk about the stimulus package, he was adamantly against it, as Republicans were at that time, and for the most part. So it passed through, and now it comes out during the campaign that he writes letters people within his district looking for stimulus money. Now, that to me is really inconsistent. How can you, on one hand, but that's the nature of politics in some ways.
Which is horrible.
There's again, I save these things, and sometimes they're useful. This, I didn't even know the name of the guy. Brett Stevens is his name.
Okay.
He wrote an article, and in January I was rebuked by some readers for predicting that the GOP would lose. This is in January. And among the reasons why he said they should lose, or they would lose, was because fellow conservatives, please stop obsessing about what other adults might be doing in their bedroom. A big issue with the Republican Party.
I agree.
Okay. And so as long as it's lawful and consensual and doesn't impede on some obvious ways on you, then leave it alone. Okay.
Exactly.
The second thing, also if gay people wish to lead conventional bourgeoisie lives by getting married, that may be lunacy on their part, but it's a credit to our values. Okay, but that was another big gay right.
I agree.
Also, please tone down the abortion extremism. Support so-called partial birth abortions is as to many liberals do, is extremism. But so is opposition to abortion in cases of rape and incest, to say nothing of the life of the mother.
Absolutely.
Democrats do better with a president who wanted abortions to be safe, legal, and rare. Republicans would be done better by adopting former Governor, Indiana Governor Mitch Daniels' call for a truce on social issues. Okay. By the way, what's so awful about Spanish? It's a fine European language with an outstanding literary tradition, and it would do you no harm to learn it. Bilingualism is an intellectual virtue, not a devious sexual practice.
Absolutely.
Which remind me, can we as a GOP base demand an IQ exam as well as a test of basic knowledge from our congressional and presidential candidates? This is not a flippant suggestion. There are at least 5 Senate seats in this election cycle that might have been occupied by Republicans come January had not the inevitable stupidity of the candidate surfaced. On that subject, please explain where the political goal is in dehumanizing Latin American immigrants. California Prop 187, passed in 1994, helped destroy the GOP in a once reliable state. Yet Republicans have been trying to repeat that fiasco on a national scale ever since. If the argument is that illegal immigrants are overtaxed in the welfare state, then that's an argument for paring down the welfare state, not deporting 12 million people. And if the argument is that these immigrants don't share our value, then religious hard work, personal stoicism, and the sense of family obligation expressed through billions of dollars in remittance to their families back home in whatever country they come from. So there's some other things here, but as you read through this, and that probably is a good example of why the Republicans lost.
Let's talk about this. Okay, Republicans, they lost. Okay, and no secret. Number one, you know, they have a lot of outdated views. Okay, the Republican Party as a whole, and let's back it up. Okay, but Mitt Romney, very bright. Correct me
if sometimes is a disadvantage politically.
Exactly, I agree. You know what? I think Ronald Reagan was probably one of the best presidents we had. And he wasn't a genius.
Well, I'm not sure of that either. But anyway, you can go ahead.
Okay, Jimmy Carter is supposed to be brilliant. He wasn't a good president. I mean, that's pretty the general consensus on both parties, right? And he was brilliant. But anyway, Mitt Romney, bright, well educated, well spoken. Okay. Very successful. Didn't steal the money. Didn't even inherit the money. Really worked hard and built.
He sheltered it.
Well, sheltered income. Okay. Do you have an accountant do your taxes?
I do.
Okay. Does he try to help you pay less taxes than? I mean, you're not stealing money, but the idea of a CPA or an accountant is to help you pay just what you owe, not more than what you owe, and maybe even have ways to shelter some income. Right? Am I right or am I wrong?
Well, I'm not. My return. I'll compare mine to yours, Joe. Okay, but mine isn't too complicated anymore. So that's.
But think about that, and then there's investment.
Well, now wait a minute. Now, that's where you get kind of in a gray area because President candidate Mitt Romney,
correct,
had an IRA, and I've got some experience in the insurance business with over $100 million in that account.
Fine.
Now that's an astronomical amount of money for someone that could put $5,000 a year away that used to be $2,000 a year, and add your spouse in if So when you say, how the heck do you get to $100 million when you only can put in $5,000 or $6,000 a year towards a retirement?
You think he did it illegally? You think
No.
He did? Okay.
No, but he did it in such a way that.
God bless him. Good luck.
Well, that's what he said.
No, but I'm saying, why should he be faulted? You know, this country was. But
he did it offshore.
Listen, my grandfather came to this country broke. Didn't even have 2 nickels to rub together, pennies.
Yeah.
And worked hard and taught my family, his sons, and now we're the 3rd generation, to work hard. And you know, you work hard and you build a business and you save some money and you grow a business. I mean, that's the American dream. And Mitt, you know, I think Mitt was a poor candidate because he was too perfect looking. I mean, here's a guy that looked like
with the fake gray hair.
They all do that.
But why didn't he ever get any grayer?
A little bit. I know. I agree with you. But they all do that. Name somebody, and I think it's gross. I like your white hair. I would love to get
I wish
gray.
I had more of it.
I wish I had gray hair. I can't wait. I keep on telling my wife I'll look for the gray hair.
You will. You get better looking.
I think it's distinguished. I think it's great. But anyway, and you get to be a certain age, I think it shows wisdom. I don't know. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But I think he looked like a Ken doll. I mean, and you know what? Perfect family. It's not a typical American family. And you know what? I don't think he had skeletons. I think if he did have a scandal in his life, he'd probably be respected more. I mean, the guy doesn't drink. Probably a bad thing, too. He probably should have a pop or two. Maybe it might help him. He very rigid. You know, Mormon, that scared people. Mormon, it's like saying you're in some freaky religion. I credit him for having a belief in a religion. I don't know anything about Mormonism, but, you know, I'm Catholic. But, I mean, I think it's nice for someone to practice a religion and believe in the religion. And he was very committed to his church. Donated a lot of money to charity. And I've even heard about things after the fact that he quietly did money. Not that he was some big...
Well, he did. Although, again, much of what he did give was in the church. The Mormon Church expects you to tithe. That's 10%.
Catholic Church does too, really. I mean,
they don't enforce that, and they.
My church they call one shared response. They don't. I love my church. They don't pass a basket around.
Oh, really?
Instead, you're supposed to. And I remember this was an outrage back in the 70s when I go to the same parish I grew up in. And they came up with something called one shared response.
Yeah.
The priest would get up to the altar and say once a year, we're not going to pass the basket of this church. Basically, whatever you make, 1% of it you should turn over to the church. And our church. I mean, not just all for charity.
Yeah.
And now they tell you give what you can.
Yeah.
But it's still called OSR, one shared response. But anyway, to me that's tithe, right? That's not.
But you're right. He had and anything that could have been in his background, the way that they dig into you, it's obviously you can't hide much anymore. The way you get the virtual life and you get computers and whatever.
Oh, yeah.
But he seems like two people. You have the husband who was a faithful husband, great father, great relationship with not only his children, appears his grandchildren. They're all in the mix. Very successful family. Hardly, even when you look back at the Roosevelts and some of these other people, that when you get to the second and third, Kennedys, get to the second, third generation, the genes weaken and something happens. But, you know, he deserves a lot of credit for that. But, you know, at the same point, he was the best of the candidates that they had because he had the most money.
Right.
He was seasoned from a prior election.
No question about it. He's a flip-flop. But John Kerry was the king of flip-floppers. And I just think, like as you're telling me, a politician tells people what they want to hear.
Well,
and that's the thing. And you know what? He changed his views on a lot of things. Some, okay, and maybe he should convey it more. Because sometimes you change a view because you learn differently or the more you're out there and seeing things and understanding things, you know. But again, they're afraid to make these bold comments because they don't want to alienate voters and.
But he did routinely. I mean, the very fact that he would get up in whether it was a public or a private event and say 47% of the people. I mean, that alone was and the interesting thing that the fastest growing group and the highest earning groups of people in America today are Asians. There are 4 groups. You look at the Asians, the whites, the Hispanic, and the people of color. And the people of color have been here the longest, and their average income is under $40,000. The Hispanics or the Hispanic people are over 40. The white people are 50, and the Asians are 60%. And the Asians have strong family values. They're dedicated to hard work. They're relying on each other to grow successfully in this country. and 2/3 of them voted for Democrats. And yet they are, on the surface, ideal prospects for Republicans.
Well,
but they don't trust them.
The
and that's
Republican Party, come on, it's portrayed, and you know what? And you take the people like Todd Akin and some of those people. I think they're nut jobs. I mean, I'll call it what it is. Okay, they are. Todd Akin is a nut job to say these things, but I do think that, and Obama was great at this. Okay, point the Republican Party and the Republican candidate as an out of touch, wealthy white guy. Okay, and it's true because I mean you would see a rally, and you couldn't see a person of color or a person of any ethnicity in the audience of every rally he spoke at. And the Republican Party, unfortunately, has become, well, it always was, like an older white man's party. And it's wrong to say. The Democrats have always reached out to all different people. And shame on the Republicans and Mitt Romney for not doing that, because Hispanics are an important part of this country, as is Asians and every other, and women. I mean, come on, they really have not welcomed that. And the Republican Party needs to wake up and become more diversified if they expect to do anything in this country. And I think you're absolutely right there. But I think Romney, you know, I'll defend him. I mean, met him a few times. I found him, to be honest with you, very nice guy, very very awkward. He spoke for me at the chamber here.
You
were there. You were there.
Yep, yep.
And you know, nice guy. But I mean, I'll tell you something. Ted Kennedy. I mean, I hit it off with him like a drinking buddy. I mean, he was that type of guy. And a lot of the politicians I met Bill Clinton a couple times, and he was charismatic. He would just light up a room. Last time I saw Mitt Romney, I was 2.5 years ago, before he ran again. I was at the Las Vegas airport on business, flying to L.A. And I went into line in a little cafeteria, and I was going to get a snack for the plane, and he was in front of me. And there was a young aide that was with him that came up, but he was by himself. He dressed very well. And I said, Governor, I said, Joe Piantedosi, and he just very awkward with his skin. And I introduced myself. I said, I had you speak for me in the chamber. Started mentioning a few people that I knew that he knew well. Yeah. And I knew he knew them, but he didn't relate to anybody. But I just think it was a personality a flaw. It wasn't that he felt like he was an elite and above everybody. I think he lightened up, and it came too late. I think people were surprised that first debate that he did, that he looked presidential, that he knew the issues. He was bright. He was articulate. He seemed more caring and compassionate. And to hear sound bites and to have the stones cast upon him by rivals, which, as you read, is what politics is all about. They did a good job at it. You know, but here's a guy that my take is bright, and all that stuff. And you know what? Knows business, knows the economy, and I think he could have helped the economy. But I think he and the Republican Party was worst enemy. I mean, even Chris Christie. I mean, the storm hit and everything else, and all of a sudden Obama, who wasn't really embracing, was totally bipartisan. And there he is hugging Chris Christie. And Chris Christie, I mean, the keynote speaker of the Republican Party, they were having a love fest up there, you know, which really hurt Romney a few days before the election.
Well,
I think it did. And Bloomberg came out.
Everything counted. Bloomberg gave him kind of a left-handed comment because he was indicated he was disappointed with his first 4 years. So,
but endorsed him. Just
he did.
2 days
well,
before the
because
election.
it's like sometimes maybe you get the lesser two evils, or you end up deciding, well, maybe better to stay with the guy we know than the guy we
devil
might.
You know is better than devil you know.
Yeah, and again, you look back at the numbers when ultimately Karl Rove wrote a column the week before the election about how the numbers, the 9.5 million he won by the first time, are shrinking, and he knocked a million off here and a million off there, and it ended up Romney was going to win. And obviously, those projections on why those people were going to swing over to the Republican or the Republicans that stayed home the last time were going to vote, and a lot of the people that voted for him the first time weren't going to vote for him. All of a sudden, Romney was going to be elected. Didn't work out that way. Right. And sometimes you have to look within yourself, and therefore, ultimately, what happens, and it may be that you know, the last 4 years, although you're still getting a mandate to some extent. I mean, to me, he's been a little bit of a disappointment because he talked more than he did when he got elected. And sometimes when you're in office and you're after 2 years in your second term, that it ends up the people positioning themselves for who's going to be replace you, and therefore, although you're not a lame duck technically, your power diminishes because as you progress closer to the end of your term, you're that less much capable of changing things. Exactly. So you have to get him in early. He had the chance the first 2 years when he was president, but those things that he wanted to do, when he talked about doing before he got elected, he didn't get done. But I didn't want to leave because there's always so much to say and so little time to do. It was like Errol Fenn said about women, so many women and so little time. But the state election, I was a little surprised. I thought Brown was going to get reelected.
You were, really?
I did. And
you know why I didn't? I'll be honest with you.
Why?
Well, let me ask you a question. Did you think Romney was going to win, or do you think Obama was going to win?
I thought he could win.
Okay. My take was, I did too. I thought Romney was going to win.
I thought he could win. I didn't say he was going to win.
As the tide was turning, and it just looked like all of a sudden, but Sandy and everything came. But I stepped back, and I thought Brown was going to win. I thought Brown was a hell of a good guy. I like Brown. It dawned on me that we're in such a Democratic state, and Brown got in a special election, and there were no other candidates on the ballot when Brown ran against Martha Coakley.
It was January.
And no other candidate. Now think about it. So Mass is a blue state, Democratic state. Yeah. People were going in herds and droves to vote for Obama. Well, are they going to vote for Obama? Brown? No. Even though he was very, bipartisan and really reached across the aisle, and I think he's a man of the people, and he really is. I mean, Brown's not an elitist at all, and all this, but I think people were going to go vote for Obama, and they weren't going to vote for Brown.
Well, that's sort of something. Although, if you I looked at some of the results the next day, and in Wakefield, in most instances, her margin or her plurality was, even though Obama carried his communities, her plurality was less than Obama's. And when you get to Wakefield, Wakefield voted for Obama, but they voted for Brown. But that, in a sense, was his connection was to having gone to school there. But the overall effect, the unions were very strong and very helpful to Elizabeth Warren. Huge help, though, not only because of the money, but also because of the money and the people. The foot soldiers that they put on, and the unions were very aggressive about rounding up their members. I think Brown got about 49% of the union vote when he ran against Martha Coakley, but she was a poor campaigner. It was January after Christmas, winter. He had that pickup truck thing, and he got caught in a little bit of that groundswell of support. But that I was kind of surprised, because even if I didn't agree with him on some issues, that I felt that if there isn't a negative vote, and people thought he was a nice guy, so therefore I thought he was well.
And I think he deserved a full term, because he didn't get a chance to serve a full term, and I think he would have done. He was.
Well, he's got to maybe get a chance when Kerry leaves. But I will say this: I think it also points up that 6 years to me is too long for a senator to hold office. 4 years should be long enough. That was created 250 years ago.
She'll be 70 years old when her term's up. 69.
Well,
she's 63 years old. She'll
Dick Lugar was running again. He was 80 when he was running for re-election,
and Thurman,
from Indiana.
Sean Thurman was what, 100, I think.
Well, he was, yeah, but before he finally vacated the earth and vacated the earth. But a couple of quick things. One other thing that I was really surprised at and very disappointed was Richard Tassay didn't win.
Devastated at that one.
I had Michael Goldman on a show that I did in the beginning of the year. I said that, and he was an advisor to him. He did some consulting and I don't know if he was with him the whole time, but he was at the beginning of the year, and he was helped him with his prior elections, some of them anyway. That if you have a vote, which Tassay had, and the other person has a negative vote, that means, to my mind, is that you should have a pretty good chance of winning.
Correct.
The polls suggested he was winning. The Globe endorsed him again. That maybe doesn't have as much influence as it might have had at one time. The baggage that Congressman Cheney had between not only the brother-in-law refuting what he was saying, and the very fact his wife was
jail,
and then getting that money and claiming they should have been indicted for tax evasion.
Exactly, $200,000.
Well, it was $24,000. It was a gift. It wasn't salary. But anyway, that was a stunning surprise to me, because I thought not only was he a capable and qualified candidate based on his track record, but he deserved to win.
No question.
And he didn't win it.
I was with Richard at 9 o'clock Monday night at the Peabody Marriott at a function. And he came up to me and he all smiles,
Yeah.
and he gave me a hug.
Yeah.
And he said, looks like we're going to do it.
Yeah.
And I said to Richard, I'm sorry I can't vote for you because
Yeah.
you're not in my
Yeah.
district.
Yeah.
And he said, well, you got to come and visit me in D.C. and bring
Yeah.
your son.
Yeah.
That was his parting words to me at 9 o'clock
Yeah.
on Monday night.
Yeah.
And that's how convinced he was. I think that libertarian guy that ran was the spoiler, obviously, in that race, because if he didn't, he won 16,000. How many votes did he get? I think it was 16,000 votes or whatever.
How many lose by?
No, the third
Oh, I
party.
heard. I think it's something like that.
16,000
Yeah,
votes,
I
which
didn't
if to say got those votes, or even if there wasn't a third party candidate, I think he would have. Well, but that was a shock to me
totally.
that this guy Tierney. I don't know Tierney. Never met him. Never saw him before in
Yeah.
person. Do you know him at all? Or?
No.
But I mean, I think the guy's a crook. I mean, I think the
Well,
guy.
it is true.
That's a strong statement. But I
Yeah,
mean, come
yeah.
on.
I don't know. I can't. comment.
Supposedly, he went to the Dominican Republic. He, according to the brothers-in-law,
He shared the vacation location. Yeah.
and he
yeah.
was at the place where they were doing this offshore illegal gambling.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, come on. Your wife comes home with extra money. Don't you have any dear? I mean, come on. Where did she get the money? I mean, well, we're running out of time. We could go on for hours, but
Well, anyway, that was a big surprise, and unfortunately, you say, well, look, it'd be very Republican, and you can understand maybe why on the national level you didn't win because of the candidate and
Right.
because of the dynamics of how the demographics were set
and
up.
some of the dumb comments made by someone like
yeah,
Todd Aiken and the other senator
but,
too about abortion.
But and even in the say with Brown, well, maybe there was maybe he lost because, like you say, there was a groundswell of Democrat voting, and he got the benefit. He didn't get the benefit of that. She did, but that to say on all kinds of things that you usually look at should.
You know what surprised me in this state, and now you're an Irish politician, born and brought up in the state, and that's what this state was made up of. You look at two of our top officials, Governor Patrick and now Senator-elect Warren, they're transferred, they're carpetbaggers. I mean, what happened to the Honey Fitz and the Kennedys and people like Ed Lucey that were born and brought up here? Why aren't you guys still running this state? I think we'd be better off. That's my take.
Both presidential candidates came from nowhere because they don't live any place, and certainly Obama came from an unusual background.
Maybe can you?
But one last thing, if we could sneak it in we got about half a second or half a minute.
Half a minute.
Representative Fallon endorsed Brown, and the interesting thing, he got 77% of the vote. So it doesn't, even though he ran unopposed, apparently it didn't matter much that he endorsed a Republican.
More to come. Let's do this again. This is great. I can't believe how fast this went. I'd love
All
to.
right, okay.
I want to be on your show next.
Okay.
Happy Thanksgiving. I won't be here next week. I think the show's off next week. So happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Good evening, Malden. To be continued. Ed Lucey and me to talk about the state of the state regarding Republicans versus Democrats, the election. We got more time. Look at this. It's supposed to be running out. Anyway, take care. Great to have you as a guest, Ed. Always a pleasure.
My pleasure.
Mayor Ed Lucey. Thank you, everybody. Good night, Malden. That went by fast. Didn't it?
Hey you, get out of the dock and into the zone.